what is your MVP criteria? Because that conversation is coming around now. About 20-something games left for every team. I saw Kevin Garnett recently say that MVP is best player on the best team. I don't agree with that at all, because then it's just no point of voting. You just choose who had the best record, choose the best player, and the MVP. And I also feel like there's so much more that goes into it. So I'm going to ask you first before I say what mine is. What would make you vote somebody for MVP?
I personally, like you said, I disagree entirely with the best player on the best team, just because it's the best team, and this is a most valuable player award. The key word is player; it's not team. While I do believe an MVP can't be the best player on a non-playoff team. I think that has to be part of the criteria. The team should be a playoff team. It's fine if they make it in the play-in for me. To me, that's cool too. Still a playoff team. But aside from that, it just has to be, man, who shoulders the most load that can result to W's consistently for that team, or consistent enough to get them into the playoffs. So, and they need a minimum amount of, I don't like the games played threshold, because I don't think it should be that clear cut. I'd rather a minutes threshold. 65 games is somewhere around like 60 some percent. I think if you just translate that to minutes, of the minutes that a player should play, something like that, that should be a criteria as opposed to games played. Because some players, if you're on a good team, you get blowouts, or, maybe some players will play longer stretches in games. We'll get more minutes with players on the floor as opposed to more games of them not really trying. So I don't know, maybe it's just my thing, but I do think a minutes criteria has to be. But honestly, the biggest criteria is, how does this man affect what they're scheming up against him? How does he make his teammates better? Even if and how does he impact the game of basketball? Not just on the offensive end, on the defensive end. Recently, a lot of MVP has been going to just, I don't want to say just, but it's kind of steered away from that. But for a long time there, it was basically all offense. What did you do offensively? Cool. That's what we value. Some of the things aren't measured with stats. Pace has a lot to do with it. Some teams play really fast. Some teams play really slow. So, the stats for the players, they'll just vary too much. So it's just more of an eye test thing. Who do you think is the best player in the league? Point blank, period. It doesn't have to be I don't think the MVP naturally translates to the best player in the league. It's just the best player in the league that season.
Yeah.
And that's a clear distinction, because, people get caught up in the bias of when Joker got 2 in a row, he couldn't win 3 because is he the best player in the league and the championship? First of all, that should not matter. It's a regular season award. If they want to add a playoff MVP, I definitely think they should add a playoff MVP. But the regular season is the regular season for a reason. And those are just my criteria. Basically, just minutes played, has to be in a playoff team minimum, and has to impact the game on both ends. And if he slacks on either end, then he has to more than make up for it on the other.
Yeah, 100%. So first of all, I like the point you made about it going to offensive players, because a couple years ago I realized, and this was around that time, the MVP conversation is just, the ticket into it is basically 28 points per game. That's what it was at the time. So I like that point. My criteria is very similar to yours, pretty much. It's just, where would this team be without this player, right? Because I saw the Jason Tatum conversation recently, and Jason Tatum, his numbers are MVP-like. He's had an MVP-like season, but his team is so, there's so many players playing at such a high level on his team, it's difficult to single him out as most valuable, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I differ with the best player on the best team thing, because it's like you said, well, the team is good, so I don't know how you can really gauge that. I think it's just a matter of who has the biggest impact on their team, like you said. So like a Luka, for example, he's been in MVP conversations for years now, but the Mavs has been an average team. But that's also no fault of his. It's that's what I'm saying. It should be something like that. It should be for example, Tracy McGrady gets a lot of slack for his playoff performances, but you look at those rosters; those teams had no business in the playoffs to begin with. It was all Tracy McGrady, and I remember him not being in those MVP conversations for that same reason. And so, I don't necessarily think it has to be even at the top of the conference. You don't have to be a 1 or 2 seed or even 3 seed, I think, to win MVP. Like the Russell Westbrook year, like that's Kevin Durant left. He did average a triple double, and I understand that's like a thing people look at, but I don't view triple doubles as just a cool stat. I think triple doubles just kind of are a statement on how much you're doing to affect multiple facets of the game. And so I think the controversy around him winning that MVP doesn't make a ton of sense because once again, you take Russell Westbrook off that team or you injure him or whatever, they're in the lottery somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I think it should definitely just be I understand winning is important, but we should factor in winning with the roster you have and basically how much would they win if you win out. That's how you measure who's most valuable to their team, I think. Now, similar question to on the defensive end. Defensive player of the year. Typically that just goes to either a big or it goes to somebody with cool counting stats. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's necessarily fair either. So what's your criteria for defensive player of the year?
To be honest, I think you said the 28 point per game threshold, and that was a phenomenal point. I think defensively, like the thing people look at is stocks, so steals and blocks. I think, like you said, throw that shit out the fucking window.
Yeah.
I don't think that's relevant for a defensive player. First of all, we've witnessed players put up high defensive block numbers and not be good. We've seen players put up high steal numbers and not be a good defender.
Right.
This is no shade towards De'Aaron Fox. He's second in the league in steals. Nobody considers him a lockdown defender.
Right.
He's just quick and he's good in the passing lanes. He's quick. That's his strength, but he's not a lockdown defender. To me, defensive player of the year, first of all, it is. Some people say it's unfairly tilted towards big men. I disagree. I actually completely disagree with that status. I do think big should be favored in defensive player of the year because they're your last line of what? Defense.
That's true. That is true.
It's right there. It's literally like your big is your last line of defense. That doesn't mean every big has to be a rim protector to win defensive player of the year. I actually don't think that should be the case at all. But how versatile is your last line of defense? How many things can he excel at? Or if he's confined to 2 or 3 things, how well does he do those 2 or 3 things? For example, we've talked about Gobert. He's not really going to go out there and switch, but he's elite in drop and he's elite at the level. Cool with me. And it's not just his impact in terms of stocks or whatever. It's how does he make the team better? I do think the defensive player of the year should be very heavily tied to that team's defensive rating.
Yeah.
With that player on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that because sometimes, let me repeat that because sometimes people, the defense is horrible when he's off the floor and then they're like, he has a 9th ranked defense. How is he winning defensive player of the year? But with him on the floor, they're a top 3 defense. That should further his argument for a defensive player of the year, ex-player, whoever it may be. But to me, it should definitely be a big, again, the minutes thing should be also in fact. But I personally, I don't think you need to be a playoff team to be a defensive player of the year.
Right.
Very few instances that should be the case, but today's league is an offensive-based league. There's too much talent on the floor. So it's one of the biggest things that have shifted me from this whole defense wins championships mentality is you can have one elite offensive player and have an average offense, but if you have one elite defender, your defense can still be bottom 5.
Yeah.
We're seeing it with San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really the fact of like it's got to be his impact on the game, the particular player. I do think it should be somebody in the front court. I don't think it should be a backcourt player. That to me is a whole different conversation, and they should have a defensive guard or wing of the year, the perimeter player of the year, whatever they want to call it. Mm-hmm. But I do think your defensive player of the year should almost entirely be a center or a power forward, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think it should basically be like the NFL does it, to where it's defensive MVP. So not necessarily like the stat thing is a great point you made. I do kind of hate that we look at that. No disrespect to Jaren Jackson Jr. winning it this past season, but I feel like a lot of people just looked at the blocks and decided, all right, he's defensive player of the year.
Absolutely.
Now they usually do a pretty good job. Otherwise, like when Kawhi was winning when Draymond was winning it, but they've kind of gone away from it, it seems like. And so I do think it should just be a matter of how much this player affects the defense. So like Rudy Gobert, for example, and we talk about Rudy Gobert a lot, but it's just like what he does as a paint protector is incredible. You can't bring the ball around him. You can't shoot near him, and players tend not to. I think deterring shots should also be a factor in it. I think on a guard side of it, because like you mentioned the bigs are the last line of the defense, but I do think guards should get more credit as far as not letting it get that far. So like being able to navigate screens, being able to blow up actions, being able to do these things, I think that's something that should be looked at. I also think the voting should change, because a lot of times you'll have local reporters voting and they just don't even really have the time to watch all these other teams. And so you kind of have to go to the numbers and rely on the numbers to figure it out. So I do think they can change that also, because defense, I personally don't believe numbers really mean much of anything a lot of times. Well, at least they're not really accurate as far as how good or bad a player is. I think defensively, they really kind of tell you nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to kind of look at just basically what the defense is forcing offenses to do and what they're preventing, like a Bam Adebayo being able to switch 1 through 5 and making it difficult for teams to do what they want to do. And that's the complete opposite of Rudy Gobert and the way he impacts the game. I don't think one should be favored in front of the other. I think they should just be, how is this impacting this team's defense? And that way you end up with no bias towards guards, with no bias towards bigs, but it takes watching the games. And I'm not saying you have to be an expert, because I don't consider myself an expert, but just having an idea of what's going on, or at least an interest on what's going on out there on the defensive end, because there's been plenty of times where we said this in earlier episodes, like Sean Marion never making an all defensive team is insane. Iman Shumpert never making an all defensive team is insane. And so I think, but they didn't have Sean Marion had big steals numbers, and block numbers were pretty good some years, but there's just so much that goes into defense that these players are doing out there that they get no credit for, because it doesn't show up in a box score. So I do think the main thing is just watching the games and understanding what these players are really doing out there on that end on the floor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It really takes watching the game, like you said, because I can think of several defensive players who are absolutely or used to be, maybe they aren't anymore, but like a guy like PJ Tucker, extremely impactful. If you were to look at his stats, you'd be like, this guy, what is he doing on the court sometimes? But it takes watching the game and seeing just how detailed they are with their impact on the defensive end. And I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting guards, and like I don't think they should take it, because they absolutely deserve credit. But I like the way you said it, defensive MVP.
Yeah.
I do think that should go to a front court player, 3, 4, or 5 particularly. I do think guards should get love. It's just, it's not the same level of impact for me. And they should just completely, they need some revamping anyways of these damn awards, if I'm being very honest. It's been very bland for the last, it's felt like 30 years.
Yeah.
But, you know, in this case, man, it's tough. I think it's tough, like you said, to discredit players like Bam Adebayo defensively. I don't care if I sound like a fucking homer. He's sensational. Like, you can call homer. I don't give a fuck, honestly. But
and Nick Claxton, same thing.
Yeah, Nick Claxton, same thing. Yeah. It's just, it's the impact, the versatility of these players defensively. Anthony Davis, I feel like he just never gets credit defensively, but like this, like the Lakers are consistently a great defense because of AD, or in large majority thanks to AD and his versatility, his rim protection, his ability to play at the level. He can switch out when he needs to. Like these kind of players are, you know, in my opinion, should be because the defensive scheme is completely built around that one player.
Yeah.
If your defensive scheme is completely built around one player, then yes, typically those should be the guys who are winning the defensive player of the year. An interesting point I want to bring up about Bam, because everybody knows how good he is in switching out guarding perimeter players. This year has actually been the year he's dropped the most in his entire fucking career, and he's allowing like 0.9 points per possession. He's like a top 5 big in drop coverage, and he's 6'9" at like but he doesn't have the block numbers.
Right.
It's crazy to see. That to me is more valuable than 3 blocks or 2 blocks a game or whatever it may be. So it's just little things like that. But
that's a great example of what we're saying. Basically, you kind of have to watch the games and figure out what's going on before you should be able to vote for MVP. Because drop coverage, I understand Bam thriving in that, because a lot of people's idea of drop coverage is like you're kind of just sitting back and waiting for the offensive player to get to you. But no, you're still covering that ground. And so Bam may not block the shot, but he is still a threat to get out and get to you if you try to pull up and not only contest, but maybe stop you from shooting it completely. And so also to the AD point you made, which was a great point, because I, for some reason, didn't even think of him. Defensive MVP would really stop him from being snubbed every year, because you take away him from that defense. And I understand, look, LeBron is a good defender. I'm not going to take away from LeBron. He's not the defender he once was, but he's still a good defender. You take AD out of that defense, and you're relying on a lot of D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, just Torian Prince is a good defender. Cam Reddish is a good defender, but they don't have a lot of defensive talent outside of Anthony Davis over with the Lakers, and that's why they're kind of an average team. So, man, Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, a bunch of guards, a bunch of wings. If you change the defensive MVP, or at least look at it as defensive MVP, you would have a lot more guys getting a lot more of the credit they deserve. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Playoff Foul. I'm Kenny. I got Lou with me. Lou, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's been a great day. It's a Sunday. Unfortunately, tomorrow we work, but today we're still working, baby.
Yeah, man. I'm still, my sleep schedule's still backwards from staying up all night editing, but I don't mind. We're going to go ahead and get right into it. The New Orleans Pelicans they've looked a lot better than they've been. Honestly, I'm gonna be transparent. We looked up their record in the last 10 games. They're only 6-4, 10-5 in the last 15. But Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram are really coming along. They've had Zion distributing a lot more. Now, when we talked about the Pelicans before, we had an idea of playing Zion at the center more, which is still a good idea. But the Pelicans have kind of done the opposite. They've had him initiating, which is, I think, a great idea.
I love it. I love it. So a fun fact. First of all, let me take y'all back to this is the scouting of Zion Williamson. When I first seen him as a prospect, you see the dunks and the highlights first, but when I dove into his Duke game, I was like, he is a fucking great passer.
Yeah.
Like, he was their best playmaker. He was their best play initiator and play finisher, which is why he was so special. So it's tough to compare players because I don't think that does them justice, but I like to compare just because it gives people an idea, I guess, it puts something next to that player so they can kind of like a reference. Yeah. But in Zion's case, it's funny because I was like, he's a point center to me. I think he should be the 5, not because he's a paint protector or anything, but fill him up with space, kind of like what the Pelicans have now. To be honest, bigger wings, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, guys who are pests defensively, and Zion's job is just to rebound on the defensive end, play at the level because he does all that stuff. But then offensively, he can just grab the rebound and go.
Yeah.
And just be your entire spot. He's a one-man fast break by himself. Now with this arsenal of shooters that they've put around him, even more so. So I do like the way that they're spacing for him since January 31st, he's averaging 6.5 assists a game. He's leading the team. BI is second with 6.3. So it's like these two guys have completely taken the reins. And it's no discredit to CJ McCollum. I'm going to give him credit because it takes a lot because he was playing point guard pretty good for them too.
Yeah.
Like, but it's just different when Zion is with the ball in his hand. He is not as good of an off-ball player because we kind of know what spots he's at. But with the ball in his hand, CJ McCollum's a bigger threat than Zion is off-ball. Especially once you factor in you got Jonas there too. Like the spacing is a little iffy sometimes. But with Zion initiating, it's like, it takes it. It basically solves that. Like that's the solution for that. So I do think it's really good. The fact how he's bringing it up, how he's playing, how it really hasn't faltered his efficiency since then. And he's just been, in general, impacting the game in so many ways since that stretch.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to touch on because CJ McCollum, obviously he's a very good player. So you put him, he's always been a combo guard, but we really saw him thrive playing the two next to Dame, right? And so when you make him a full-time point guard, it kind of takes away from that in a second because when you're a point guard, you do have to focus on, am I getting my guys involved? Who's hot right now? Or who needs to see the ball go in right now? There's a lot you have to think about. And I think CJ McCollum is at his best because, like you said, he was a good point guard, but he's at his best just being able to go out and score. And so you have Zion, who I don't care who you are or what defensive scheme you're in, he's getting to the basket if he feels like getting to the basket. And so now he can kick out to CJ McCollum. And CJ McCollum doesn't really have to work as hard to score with the ball. He can just attack the closeout. Brandon Ingram is great either way, but you give him a chance to attack closeouts also. He's a 35% three-point shooter or somewhere around there, I think, this season. Definitely in the past 4 games, he's 35%. So he's okay there, but he's still able to shoot well enough to force a hard closeout and attack and get to his mid-range pull-up, which he's great at. You have a Trey Murphy Zion can kick out to. And then obviously there's himself. You get Zion with a head of steam going downhill, you're not going to be able to do anything about it. Not only is he going to just cave your chest in, basically, he's an incredible finisher. And so I do think they may not need to change his position officially, and they may not need to go to him 100% because, like you said, Brandon Ingram's also a really good playmaker. But giving him the ball more is going to definitely be the best case scenario for this Pelicans team. And throw him these lobs on fast breaks, whatever. But you can also run lob plays for him. That's cool, but still have him initiate those. Get rid of the ball, set the down screen or pin down or whatever you want to call it, and then something like that. But initiating, I think, honestly, I don't know why I didn't think Zion was always the answer.
It just opens up so much more. Like since that stretch, basically since the last day of January, like CJ is now up to 8.5 threes a game. A lot of that is just catch and shoot threes now. And he's knocking them down at 39.6%. So he's almost shooting 40% on these opportunities off of Zion, off of Brandon Ingram creating. It just makes more sense. All right, who's our best shooter? Let's not have him initiate the entire set of the offense because the spacing won't work as well. Let's have him set up somewhere on the weak side or even on the strong side, but let's just make sure he's like 1 or 2 passes away. So once he gets it, he can just, and we know what kind of shooter CJ is. So it's worked in tandem beautifully with him and like Trey obviously shooting at the clip he's been shooting recently. Like the team has definitely caught a little bit of a stride here. It's very interesting to see that they're basically like still in the hunt between like are they going to be in the play-in? Are they not? Which is crazy because a team this talented, like that, the West is fucking crazy right now. But a team this talented should not, like, the play-in shouldn't even be across the mind of, at least it wouldn't even cross my mind because they're just that good.
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned with the CJ stuff, at the end of the day, every set you run, everything, whether it's pick and roll, whether it's dribble handoffs, it's all to make the defense bend and make a decision. And so when you have CJ initiating, and again, no disrespect to CJ, he's a good playmaker, but when you have him initiating, you know where Zion's going, like you said. And so you can just stick a low man down there in whatever you want to do and you take something away. You kick out the CJ. Because look, if Zion's getting to the basket, you need 3 people down there. He's still probably going to finish it, but you're not stopping him with just helping off one person. And so CJ is going to be open. And like you said, 39 point something percent from 3, that definitely works out. Now, the person who stood out to me while I was watching the Pelicans, Zion's been great, but Brandon Ingram right now in his last 4 games, since he came back from an injury, 27.5 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, 5.3 assists per game. He seems to really be hitting his stride because he was playing pretty decently earlier this year. He was actually kind of struggling before he ended up missing the 2 games, but now he looks like the Brandon Ingram we know.
Yeah, he's been every bit as good as advertised recently. His ability to attack these secondary closeouts and not even just that, like facilitate for other people while still getting his own is something he's gotten a lot better at. Because just a couple years ago, this wasn't really the case. It was like when BI got the ball, it was going to end up in a shot.
Yeah.
Most of the time. But his ability to just learn how to get off the ball and just play make for others when he has the ball has taken his, like, it's made his job easier as a scorer. And when he gets the midi going, man, it's truly like one of the best in the league shooting mid-rangers, period. Just his ability to do that, his ability to space out, create for himself, get to the rim, getting to the free throw line about 5-6 times a game as well helps because he's a good free throw shooter. It's very unfortunate that the talk around this team is if they don't win, they need to split these guys up. I don't think these guys are the problem.
Right.
Like, are we watching when they've played together? Yeah. When they've played together, even last year, they were the number 1 seed up until injuries just ravished their whole season and basically missed the playoffs. Like, when this team is healthy and when they are together, I don't think you need to trade anybody on this fucking team.
Right.
It's just the ancillary pieces. And, BI's been very good. Zion's been very good. CJ's been very good. Trey's been very good. But yeah, man, the team is definitely it's going to be tough because what people describe as success is how far a team goes in the playoffs or if they win or not. And how good the West is this year. This can still be a very good. There's so many very good teams that are going to get eliminated in the first round.
Yeah.
But that doesn't discredit them for being a very good team. You just played another very good team.
Exactly.
So these first round matchups we're going to get this year in the West are typically second or conference finals matchups, and we're getting them round 1. So let's not discredit anybody. I know the guy you said was BI, but Kenny, I'd be fucking remiss if I have not talked about Herb.
Wait. So I do have to say something else about BI. Because as we get more listeners, the age range is starting to kind of shift a little bit. So it's still, and I look at the metrics, still guys, not guys, people our age mostly, like between, I think it's like 24 and 34 is our main audience. But we're starting to get younger people also. So if you're younger out there, look at Brandon Ingram and just understand that getting off the ball also helps with your scoring. Like, so he's a threat to pass, so you can't really help off your man too much because he's going to find yours and you're going to get burned. And so I want to say that real quick. Now, Herb Jones is one of the best defenders I've seen in my life.
Period.
That's the way I can put that. There's nobody to really compare him to, aside from maybe, I don't even know how much you remember about Gerald Wallace with the Bobcats, but he was very different. He'll steal everything, block everything. There was nothing you could really do about him. He could guard anybody. Herb Jones reminds me of that. And he's longer than Gerald Wallace, which isn't everything, but is something. And he's so young.
And so damn talented on the defensive end. Like, I heard rumors around the deadline that they were shopping him.
That would have been stupid.
What are you doing? Why was that even a rumor? You have any team in the league will take Herb Jones with their eyes closed. Exactly what you want. 3 and D. The 3 part was questionable. whatever. He's gotten better every year as a shooter, dating back to college. Now, since in their last 15 games, he's shooting 54.8% from three.
Jesus Christ.
All of a sudden, his one weakness, which wasn't a weakness, he was just an average shooter. But the one thing everybody wanted him to get better at, he's been elite at recently. Obviously, that's not going to hold up. The numbers are going to come back down. But like I say, sometimes when people score, everybody focuses on everything else they do good. If that makes any sense, like, oh, he's scoring. Like, oh, look at also what he's doing defensively. And sometimes when he's not scoring, they take the defensive stuff for granted.
Yeah.
But he is one of the best screen
navigators.
Like navigators in, especially for his size, I've ever seen personally. Gerald Wallace is a great fucking comparison. The way he just shifts his feet, digs, recovers. He doesn't get big block numbers. That's not his task defensively. He's tasked to chase, be a POA guy, point of attack defender, guard ball. Like, the reason the Pelicans are so good, like, they're one of the best teams in basketball guarding isolation. That shit translates to the playoffs, and that shit is because of Herb Jones. So it's gonna be truly fascinating if they do get a forward thinking, whatever, a playoff matchup against a team like the Clippers, who run a lot of ISO basketball. Like, man, Herb Jones is gonna get unleashed in that series, and it's gonna be tough to take him off the floor. Just OKC is another team. Like, some of these teams that are running very ISO-centric offenses from time to time, or very like high pick and roll stuff. He has completely shut them down this year. It's been sensational. He should be a lock for defensive. What is it?
All defensive.
Yeah, all defensive team should be a fucking lock. If he doesn't make it, I'll be goddamn pissed off on his behalf.
And so that actually goes into your point of not really judging teams for getting eliminated early in the playoffs, because it is not only just about talent, it's also about matchups. And so, like you said, if they go against the Clippers, and now you can put Herb Jones on, let's say, PG, and you can put Trey Murphy, who we're going to get to, or Kawhi. You're not stopping Kawhi, but it makes things a little more difficult. And so now the Clippers really have to find some other way at times. And so I don't think there's much else to say about Herb Jones defensively aside from what we said already. I think he's one of the best defenders I've seen in my life, and he's so young. And with the shooting coming in, now it's going to be difficult to take him off the floor, which now you're going to really see his potential. And then once the shooting's good, he can work on attacking closeouts, and now he just becomes like just this incredible, because he's so young, he can still build these things. It's just incredible. But Trey Murphy, you talk about how injuries have affected this team. Obviously, aside from Zion and Brandon Ingram, I think his injury really held them back the most. But now they're back, and we see the way he's playing. I just watched him go off against the Pacers during some stretches of that game. You want to talk about 3-and-D? And then he has the athleticism to also do other things at times. It's just, I don't like saying players are going to be a star, because like players are so good now. Like it's tough to break over. There's like how many players are averaging 20 plus right now? It's
over 50.
It's ridiculous right now. But Trey Murphy is a very good player.
Yep.
And I think the sky's the limit for him. That's why I'm comfortable saying it.
Oh, absolutely. He's gotten better literally again every single year. Came in as just like a 3, just basically a shooter with some athleticism. Obviously, we've seen the athleticism. We went to the dunk contest. His defense started getting better. Then he started not just becoming a shooter, but spacing 3, 4, 5 feet behind the 3-point line. Then being one of the best transition shooters, which is also another tall task, because it's how quick can you set up into your jump shots. Now he's putting the ball on the floor. Now he's creating a little bit in these pick and rolls when he's needed to. He's attacking closeouts better. He's just doing all the little things to make this team a real threat, because they are a real threat. But all this wing versatility that this team has, we've named like 5 players, and they're all wings essentially, except for maybe Zion. And even then, he's playing the 4, so it is what it is. It's just like it's truly they're going to be truly fun to watch, and it's tough because right now they're the 5th seed, and theoretically they would play a team like the Clippers, who is one of the hottest teams in basketball as well. So it's just tough. That's why I'm saying, like, realistically, the Clippers are, maybe a finals contender. They're definitely poised for a good little run here. So even if they lose to this team, even if the Clippers lose, like, it's not it is what it is. Like, both of these teams are really good, and that's just the point I'm trying. That's basically all I'm trying to say. Like, we can't just completely discredit what this team might do or might not do come playoff time, unless they look really bad. But they've been great.
Yeah, and I do want to last thing. You mentioned Trey Murphy's transition threes. Not even necessarily with the Pelicans themselves, but I do want to take the time to acknowledge how that's become a weapon, because I graduated in high school in 2010, and so back when I played, you are getting benched if you shoot a three in transition, no matter what. Like, make a miss, you are out of here. But it's gotten to a point where it's a real weapon. And for the Pelicans specifically, let's say you have Zion leading the break and you have Trey Murphy creeping up towards that elbow, and it's a 2-on-1 fast break. What do? And so it opens up so much for really the game in general, but the Pelicans specifically, especially if you got Brandon Ingram running the other wing, or you got Herb Jones is a good transition player also. Whoever it is, it opens up so much for this team. And I think the overall point we're making about the Pelicans is whatever their record is right now, don't pay attention to that. They're a lot better than what their record is. And going into the playoffs, I wouldn't just write them off. The Cleveland Cavaliers right now, as we record, because they're playing right now as we record, are 39-20. They've been one of the best teams in the NBA. Even with Donovan Mitchell missing time recently, I know what I've seen from the Cavs. First of all, credit to Max Strus, but we'll get to him in a second. What have you seen from the Cavs that's really helping them just kind of dominate? I can comfortably say dominate.
Yeah, basically.
You also did have something interesting on them. I'm sorry, you did have something interesting on them also, but it's not to take credit away from them. It's just
no. It's they're an interesting team, right? Last year they were, again, dating back to last season, very good team, and then honestly looked really bad in the first round of the playoffs against the Knicks. Basically, the Knicks took it to them. They got out rebounded just about every single game. Jared Allen and Evan Mobley could not really contain Mitchell Robinson or Julius Randle or the rest of the team at that point, because Julius didn't even play that much, or he was playing kind of hurt. But in general, they struggle with that aspect. The physicality got to them. Their offense kind of flattened out a bit, I guess I'll say. But this season, it's looked like the injuries have been a blessing in disguise. Why? Because they've had to rely on players that they typically wouldn't rely on to do certain things that they're not, probably going to be tasked to do once this team is fully healthy. But that doesn't mean that player is not good or whatever. The guy I want to talk about is Jared Allen. He's been fucking great for them this year.
That's basically where that come from.
Crazy that his vision recently, his playmaking, his ability to not just be a lob threat, but be able to do a little bit more for the team. Because spacing is kind of negated if you're a good passer, or a good DHO guy, because you can attract players out of the paint. So all these things that he's been developing, once Mobley came back, it was just like, it still works now, and he can still do these things. So the team has been super fucking, just a super interesting team, a super interesting case study. They've been really, really good against bad teams, and they've kind of struggled versus good teams. I don't want to say the record is bad. They're 14-17. They play the Knicks today. The game's not over, so I don't know what that's going to end up like, but they're basically a little bit under 500 against good teams. I don't really know what to make of that. Right. What do you make of, first of all, does that even matter to you? And second of all, if it does, what do you make of it?
It matters a little bit, but not as much as a lot of people would make it seem, just because we don't really know the circumstances. I didn't watch every single one of those games, so I don't know what the
Exactly.
circumstances were. So I can't necessarily just take the record and say whether or not that good.
Yeah.
I will say it is probably something to look at, because if these better teams do kind of have their number, like the Knicks today, even without Jalen Brunson, it looked kind of bad for the Cavs. They were just getting outplayed and out hustled and all that stuff. They were kind of faltering on defense, just making a bunch of mistakes they don't typically make. But usually that defense is pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, having Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, you're going to be a good defense. But I also want to give credit to Max Strus, because with us being Miami Heat fans, we saw flashes of him being able to contain a guy here and there, and that was kind of the maximum that we saw. This year, he's really defending, and he's also just watching the games. Looks like he's in the best shape he's been in his career.
Yeah, he
looks
great.
Whatever he did in the offseason definitely helped. Defensively, he's kind of, I can't call him a bad defender anymore.
No.
At all. He stopped being a bad defender really in Miami towards the end there. But this season, he's a plus defender. I saw a stat recently where in isolation, he's towards the top of the league in points per possession allowed. Like, he's right behind like Rudy Gobert and Jared Allen, which those numbers don't mean everything to me, but it is something, because it is in isolation, and it kind of means teams are trying to go after him in a sense, and it's not working.
Yeah, it's crazy because first stint in Miami, he would put together some solid defensive stints.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, this year he's really pieced it together. Also, to be very honest, he's never had this level of rim protection.
True.
Miami isn't known to be a rim protecting team just because they
stopped from getting to the rim.
Yeah, they stopped. Their whole scheme is built off of you not getting there. But when you get there, it's free, essentially, because they don't really have the size to contain that. But, in this Cleveland scheme, it's perfect. They funnel everything towards the middle. Why? Because Mobley or Allen are there. And that's two of the best rim protectors in the league. So just Strus, really, the word I want to use for him is he adapts to his situation.
Yeah.
His adaptation to whatever the team is around him is elite, and that alone is invaluable for a basketball team trying to make it far. The reason for that is he knows who he is as a player, and he knows what it takes to win. Those two things sometimes don't come hand in hand, unfortunately. So, you'll have players who know who they are, but they won't do what it takes to win, and vice versa. Some players just don't know who they are and just try to win, but, they're doing a little bit too much. In Strus's case, if it honestly feels like he brought like the much needed, I'm going to use the word, fuck it, dog to this team. Like he brought like some of that hunger to this basketball team, a team that last year, to be very honest, against the Knicks, they did not have any of that.
Right.
But that little intangible there is so tough to find. It's so difficult to find. That hunger is not something you can teach. It lets, guys like Okoro come off the bench, makes their bench a little better, because I do think Okoro is a very good basketball player. Having veteran guys who have done this before helps out the stars, and the team has been playing sensational, man. But to be honest, Kenny, we know this team doesn't run without Donovan.
That's true. And he'll be back soon. I did want to make a point about Max, though.
Yeah.
They chose somebody from the right team, because if a Heat player last season said the lights got too bright for him, Udonis hasn't been showing up at their door. It's no questions asked. But I say that to say Max Strus getting into the league, the point you made about adjusting to the team, he wasn't a shooter in college.
No.
He did some of everything, but the team was run on Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. They're not jump shooters. Jimmy shoots more this year. Bam should give you a 15-footer, but they needed shooting, and Max Strus became a shooter to make it into the league. And now he's on a team where they still need shooting, but they also need more. Unfortunately, Darius Garland's been out a ton. Max Strus is playmaking now.
Yeah.
Max Strus is getting to the basket. Max Strus is catching lobs. He's dunking on people. Credit to Max Strus there. But yeah, Donovan Mitchell is at the top of the league.
Yep.
He's missed 4 of the last 7 games. He missed tonight, but unstoppable. And I understand what Jared Allen brings as far as vertical space, and I understand what Evan Mobley brings as a vertical spacer. They're not really getting you a lot of points to get you towards winning. And as you said earlier, it's an offensive league, a lot of talent offensively.
Mm-hmm.
A player like Donovan Mitchell who can get 40 in the sleep is something you need. And so I think once he comes back, we'll get to really see more of what this Cleveland team can do.
Yeah. And we talked about MVP conversation earlier to start the show. I'm not saying he should win it. He's sure as fuck should be in the goddamn conversation.
100%.
Keeping this team afloat, lacking some of the pieces that they've been lacking. Again, it's not that the roster's bad, just injuries in general. Going on that run, being that guy offensively, carrying the load night in and night out. The level of play he's played at this year has been sensational, putting up 28 on 47, 37, and 86 efficiency while averaging over 6 assists a game, taking more of the playmaking role, not being an over dribbler because that kind of plagued him sometimes in college, just because he's so damn talented that it's normal for a player like that, but impacting every area of the game, defensively showing more effort, just in general. He's been near the top of the league this year for sure, and he deserves all the credit that he's probably not even getting, or if he is, if he's getting it, then absolutely he deserves more because he's been.
And with him being out, though, I don't even have much on this. I'm going to just lob this to you. Craig Porter Jr. getting more of the opportunity. I'm going to just lob this one to you.
Man, I absolutely love Craig Porter Jr. One of my funnest evaluations in college. He went undrafted out of Missouri. Super tough kid. But what's impressed me is just, again, it's not the player's ability to be a star. It's just to know, like, when every time he stepped onto the floor, he knows what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to do too much. Sometimes, obviously, rookie mistakes come and go. Everybody makes mistakes. Mistakes aren't just for rookies. Everybody makes them. But he's not making many rookie mistakes. He's making general, like, plays that everybody else makes, but it's a good read for him. But he's been offensively a lot better than I thought he would be coming in as personally, but just the defensive, like that side of the floor has been what's kept him in the, like, what basically got him a standard contract, if I'm being very honest. Unfortunate that Darius Garland had to miss some time, but that really gave him some time to shine that we talked about back then. And now, obviously with Donovan Mitchell missing some time, that's also been the case. So it's just pretty cool to see him stepping up when needed. Karis LeVert, unsung hero the whole year, basically being that team 6-man the whole season, primary scorer off the bench, like little things like that. Like the team is they're really a team now. It's kind of what it feels like. And they're piecing it together at the right time. That's for sure.
So did you ever see Isaiah Okoro as a 40% 3-point shooter coming? Because I didn't.
I want to say no, to be very honest, but I never thought he was a bad shooter. It was just, it's the way I'll put it, Kenny, is he was being forced to shoot a lot because that's just what the defense entailed. Credit to him. He's, like you said, 40% now, like ridiculous. He's put in the work, but no, 40%. I can't say I did, but for sure he's been sparking them this year for sure from deep, and just he affects the game in so many other ways that sometimes it was unfortunate that it all came down to, damn, he can't hit this shot every now and then. I'll be very honest. Every time he played Miami, when they needed a big shot, he shoots like 60% against us. Look up the stats. I'm not even lying. It's ridiculous. But during big games, during big moments, even last year in the playoffs, he had a couple games where his three would bail him out of a tough situation and stuff like that. Just it's adding Strus took like the pressure off of him to be that player. Yeah. And it's been sensational for his development.
And so earlier when I said the Cavs record against good teams, I can't really dig too deep into because I'm not sure of the circumstances around those games. Darius Garland just now started to look like himself again. And that's what's really scary about this whole thing because Darius Garland missed some time. He came back and it took a while for him to kind of adjust. He went off a couple games ago. Tonight, I saw he like tweaked his ankle. I didn't look at the numbers or anything to see how well he was playing. But if they can piece together what they've already been piecing together, and then you got Darius Garland being Darius Garland again, I know we say this about a lot of teams, but there's a lot of talent in the NBA. It could get kind of scary.
Yeah. I don't know how far this team is going to be able to go in the East.
Right.
Maybe they get eliminated in the first round because that's just the way shit is, apparently. Like, that's the talent in the league. But they are a very, very good team for sure. They still have some of their weaknesses. I was personally watching the game against the Chicago game, and they struggle with physical, tall teams.
Yeah.
That's been their thing. The good thing for them is, well, first of all, New York doesn't have Mitchell Robinson. Sucks for New York, but for them, it's a good thing. And to be honest, there's not many really big physical teams in the East who can punish them in that way. But it's within their own right, they're a very good defensive team. They have a go-to player offensively. Garland's coming back to form. That might mean they have two go-to players offensively. LeVert coming off the bench can provide a spark. Dean Wade has been very good for them this year. Max Strus has been very good for them this year. Isaac Okoro as well. It's just, can Mobley and Allen continue to function together in a playoff setting? That's what I really think is going to take this team. If they want to go anywhere, that's going to be the key.
It's going to be Donovan Mitchell. It's going to be health, and it's going to be their role players continuing to do what they do, because this team, just overall, they move the ball, they defend, and that's been their calling card. Even when Donovan Mitchell was in there, they move the ball and they defend. And so that's what's won them all these games. And once again, I'm going to give some more credit to Max Strus because he's improved basically every part of his game this season. So just real quick credit to him for that. Because once again, Max Strus being a lockdown defender is something I never saw coming. We're going to go home for the last topic because we didn't really mention the trade deadline or anything that came beyond that. So the Miami Heat, they traded Kyle Lowry, he looked kind of done. He's had some good games in Philly, but unfortunately players get old. It gets difficult to really contribute in certain ways.
Situations get stale also.
Yeah, situations get stale, and the Miami Heat are a team that makes by committee, so needing a Kyle Lowry type point guard, it just hasn't made much sense for some time now. So they trade him for Terry Rozier, and they get Delon Wright from the buyout market. I'm going to let you go first on this, because maybe I'm just crazy, but I think the Heat are, I'm going to let you go.
No, go ahead. Nah, for sure. Come on, man. Take it.
The Miami Heat are very dangerous. And I think a lot of people should really start paying attention right now while they're on this. I think they won 11 of the last 13 games, something like that. No, 10 of the last 13. They won 10 of the last 13 games. So 10-3 in the last 13, right after that 7-game losing streak. I feel like everybody outside of Miami is going to be surprised if this team goes back to the finals. But I think the only team that can challenge them is Boston. But I'm gonna let you go on this on these particular moves first.
So personally, I want to start with Rozier, because I don't think he's had the level of impact people are expecting from him.
Right.
I don't think that's entirely his fault. He's only been here for 13 games, but regardless, he hasn't been the quality of offensive player the team or the fans have expected. I think that's been fair to say. However, as of recently, he started to pick up his pace a little more, starting to get to his spots a little more. But one thing he's brought has been just I want to say this. He's been intentional of getting the guys who need the ball.
Yeah.
He hasn't been doing the over dribbling stuff. We saw the time of possession, the shot clock, how much it takes him to get off the ball. That hasn't been the case in Miami. He's been very good just getting off the ball, getting to his spots. I honestly, to be very honest, Kenny, I think if the shots start to fall, people will not give a shit about the rest of his game at this moment. Because to be very honest, he's been shooting 24% from three on about 5 attempts a game. I love the amount of attempts he's getting. If anything, I think he should be closer to 6 than to 5. Sometimes he's been passing him up. He's been trying not to step on toes. He even said it himself when he came here. And I don't want to be critical of him because obviously it's a tough stretch. And I'm not critical of the player. It's just the way I view things. I don't think he needs to come here and respect or try to not step on toes. I think the team needs him to come here and be Terry Rozier.
100%.
By that, I mean, they need him to be a scorer.
Right.
And he's been doing the playmaking and the facilitating, but they need him to be aggressive. This team has desperately needed a scoring punch at times. Even in their last 13 games, they are 18th in offensive rating. Like the team is built for defense. They're second in defensive rating. So it's a defensive first team that sometimes finds it difficult to score offensively. So just Rozier needing to unlock all this for sure will help the team. His most recent game against Utah, I thought was very good. Got to his spots, a comfortable like 14, 16 points on like 9 attempts, 5 for 9. He's been getting to the free throw line a decent amount, I would say, for somebody who's not really on the ball as much. It's just been refreshing to see him come here. Obviously, he's working through some things. He's playing alongside a lot of players who need the ball, whether that be Tyler or Jimmy or Bam. So he's trying to find his role per se on the floor, his spacing and all this. But I'm curious to see. I can't wait because I know it's coming. I hope we get to see Rozier really be Rozier for a little bit of a stretch here when the team gets fully healthy. Because if that happens, oof, man, it's mighty dangerous for sure.
Yeah, and so this is the thing to point out with Terry Rozier. And I haven't seen, maybe people have been pointed out, but I don't, whatever's happening with Miami Heat fans on social media, I've tried to stay away from recently. So I haven't seen it. But the thing to point out about Terry Rozier is that he got to Miami already in a shooting slump. And so his numbers look bad as far as the shooting goes. They'll get better. This hasn't been typical Terry Rozier, and that started to happen in Charlotte. Those things happen. Shooting slumps happen to everybody. His intention, I've been impressed with. Now, the finishing at the basket, that's probably not going to get better. He's never been a great finisher when he gets to the basket. But, and no disrespect to Kyle Lowry, because I like Kyle Lowry and I understand players just get old sometimes. It just is what it is. But having somebody at the point guard position who is able to be a threat to score makes all the difference in the world. Because his assist numbers are not very different from Kyle Lowry's were in Miami. But that comes from drive and kick. It's different from Kyle Lowry, who's really setting guys up and sometimes just passing it down court and transition. I'm not disrespecting
quarterbacking.
Yeah, just quarterbacking. But Terry Rozier is bending the defense in a different way and finding open guys. And it's made things a lot easier for everybody. There's times where now Tyler Hero can get into his playmaking thing and he can find Terry Rozier, who, again, once the shots start falling, it'll look different numbers-wise, but they've generated good offense. It's just you have guys struggling at times, and they also play very slow, and they don't give themselves a chance to boost those offensive numbers.
Yeah.
Because they're just not getting out in transition the way we feel they should. But the Terry Rozier move, I love, because like you said, they've needed a scoring punch for a while now. Tyler Hero has been the only, and he gets a lot of flack, and I'm not going to get into it. We're not talking about Tyler Hero today, but he's been the only guy who can create his own shot for a while now. Jimmy can also, but that's kind of usually in the post. It's very slow and methodical. So now you have Terry Rozier, who, again, also isn't like the greatest three-point shooter in the world, but in that mid-range area can really create and space the floor enough to where a roller or somebody as good in the dunker spot as Bam Adebayo is can get opportunities, to where Jimmy Butler can get some opportunities, where he can kick it out to a Tyler Hero or to a Duncan Robinson if he's on the floor, or to a Nikola Jovic who's been around 40% from three recently, which where'd that come from? I appreciate it, but that was fast. And so I think offensively, Terry Rozier definitely brings something the Heat haven't had in a long time. And I think come playoff time, we'll really see how scary this team is going to be, because it's coming. It's on the way. It's already kind of here.
Yeah.
But it's on the way.
Yeah. It's, I've been fighting a fight this year. And I really don't care to. I just think it's cool to see different opinions and stuff. But this team, in my opinion, is better than they were last year.
Easily.
Better and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
I want to state both of those things because those things are different. They're definitely deeper, but I do think they're better than they were last year. Again, will that result in a finals appearance? Who knows? Maybe not. Most likely not, to be very honest. But again, to me, that's irrelevant. The team is still very good. It's just Rozier brings certain things to this team that they didn't have before. Like you stated, his shooting around the rim hasn't particularly been good. He's still only shooting 50% at the rim. For example, if that even comes right back up to where it was in Charlotte, that's still 7 or 8% better. His 3-pointers, haven't really been falling either. So it's just the midi has been really, really strong for him. But once that 3-pointer starts falling, the efficiency numbers start to look a little different. The floor opens up a little more. His confidence starts to rise a little bit more. He's been doing certain things that have been impacting the team, and the shot hasn't been falling. So once the shot starts falling and the team starts getting accustomed to one another, because they haven't even, to be honest, since Rozier's came back, it's felt like the team's always been unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been like that the whole year. But so once they really get a groove, hopefully they can get a groove here in the last 20 games to kind of really get everybody's role squared in a way before the playoffs, because the team is very deep.
Yeah. And so speaking of playoffs, a couple years ago, we were watching Heat versus Hawks. Mm-hmm. And me and you didn't know each other back then, but I'm watching this like Delon Wright is giving this team hell on defense. And the Heat finally made the move they should have made years ago, especially with Darrell Wright still having his relationship with the team for 20 years now since being drafted in 2004. And Delon Wright, in the minutes he's played, because I have questions for Spo in recent games, but in the minutes he's played has been every bit of what the Heat have needed defensively from a guard for years now.
No, this is what they need. This is all right. So let me take it back to last year. The Heat lost 2 players. It was Max Strus, Gabe Vincent. To be honest, Max Strus signing hurt, but they had Duncan Robinson, who Max Strus had stolen minutes from. Duncan had gotten his groove in the playoffs, particularly. The team had some answers there. Mm-hmm. However, when Gabe Vincent left this team, there was not a single answer on this roster that could have been had. It's not to state that Gabe Vincent is a sensational basketball player, but Gabe Vincent was a playoff starter for this team now in 2 of the last 3 postseasons. They won more games when he was out there starting than when he wasn't. So the impact that he made regardless was felt. Most of the impact he made was defensively.
Yeah.
That was Gabe Vincent's strength. So they go out there and they get Delon Wright, somebody who's 6'4", 6'5" at the point guard position, whose steal percentage has been above 90th percentile every single year of his career and 99th percentile the last 3 seasons. A guy who creates turnovers defensively is not easy to come by in the NBA. Getting that guy off the buyout market while he's still somewhat in his prime, he's only 30, 31 years old, is just that much harder. So it's just, he's gotten some DNPs recently. The team is very deep, but having another tool in the tool shed at your disposal versus a team like the Knicks, a team like the Celtics, a team like Milwaukee, a team like Cleveland. Obviously, we talked about the guards that they have in that room. 3 guys who can score. Makes gives you just that much more versatility defensively. And I've personally loved the way Delon has been playing recently. The few minutes that he has gotten, he's looked really good. He's looked really comfortable, is the word I want to say, particularly for somebody who is, I don't even think he got to practice with the team. Maybe he had one practice, but like he's just looked like he feels at home. And he's been saying it. That also something needs to be said for players just liking where they're at, like getting to a place that they want to play at brings out even better, like, even more in players. So he's been really good. What have you seen, and has it been as good as you've expected?
It's definitely been as good as I expected because, like I said, they've needed this for years, and particularly the fit. That's why I say he should have been here years ago. It's the fit. He can do stuff with the ball as far as just setting guys up. He's not Steve Nash or Tyrese Halliburton, but he does well enough to where you can kind of trust him in some minutes really being a point guard. But aside from that, catch and shoot is good. But defensively, the Miami Heat's strength it's not size, it's not rim protection. It's never been that. It's their defense and where they land usually just gets boosted because of the forced turnovers, right? And so you get somebody who's been, like you said, at the top of the league in deflections for years now, his whole career. And that's at the point of attack. So now, yeah, they're not a fast team. They play slow. They played slower than any team in the league in all of Spo's years, aside from a couple of the LeBron years. But now you kind of have to get in transition if Delon Wright is at the top of the key, getting his hand on the ball and deflecting the ball. You're in transition now. As far as him being able, you can put him next to Tyler Hero or next to Terry Rozier because he'll hold up defensively enough for them to be able to not relax, because you don't relax in the Heat's defense, but for everything to not necessarily be on them out on the perimeter changes things. Because even when Kyle Lowry was here, Kyle was great off the ball defensively still, but on ball, he was just a little too old. He had hamstring stuff. It just wasn't there anymore. Yeah. Even with the Josh Richardson addition, he's still who he is off ball as far as getting passing lanes and stuff, but his on ball defensive has slipped a lot since he was first in Miami. So yeah, adding in a Delon Wright is perfect. Because when you remember, they were relying on Drew Smith earlier in the season. And that's not – there's a lot of, like, Drew Smith hate within – Drew Smith was leading the league in deflections when he went down, and he wasn't playing much. A lot of – like, he played some games when guys were injured, but he wasn't in the rotation a lot of the time. He was still leading the league in deflections. So I'm not taking away from Drew Smith. I'm saying Delon Wright is bringing that plus – catch and shoot, plus he can make some, plus he's getting to the basket some, he's in transition. When they're in transition, he's a threat to score in transition. Like I said, like, look, the Heat are 10-3, like they had their losing streak. They had the little film session, they're 10-3 since. It's Boston and there's nobody else. We're going to see that matchup at some point in the playoffs, for sure, 100%. And I think with these additions, because when the Heat lost to Boston and when they almost lost last season, it was because they didn't have anybody who could score really aside from Jimmy and Bam. Well, now they got Rozier, and Hero may be healthy this year finally. They struggled with the perimeter defense. And when they got to the final, well, Gabe was pretty good on the perimeter, but they got to the finals. Aaron Gordon just putting Gabe under the basket, and there's nothing you can do because Gabe's so small. Yeah. Now you have Delon Wright, he has a wiry frame, but he's longer. He's 6'5". He has longer arms. There's a little more you can do. And so you said it, and I've been saying it since the offseason. This Miami Heat team is so much better than the team last season. Yeah. I know the records were similar going into All-Star break. There's factors to go into that. But
for sure.
Not even – look, we're Miami Heat fans. We're born and raised in Miami, but – they're a great organization. So the Miami Heat, once again, I feel like are a team you really got to watch out for.
Yeah, just in general, like the team's comfort recently. Spo might go down as never winning a Coach of the Year, which we probably might do an episode on some bullshit like that at some moment because it's ridiculous. But just the team's ability to just step into roles, Delon Wright hadn't played a single minute, and he goes out there and he gets tasked to play 35 minutes. He played 35 minutes against one of the most dynamic backcourts in all of basketball in the Sacramento Kings. 35 minutes of chasing De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk around, containing them on ball and chasing Kevin Huerter around Sabonis screens. And came out of that game with his 13 points, 5 assists, 2 steals, a block. Like, he did his thing, showcased why the Heat needed somebody like him, another playmaker defensively, alongside guys like Jimmy, alongside guys like Bam. Just really can take the team over the top. Caleb, alongside all these guys, man, the team's finally hitting their stride. And to be very honest, the team looked this good back in December.
Yeah.
It was just that stretch. That stretch in January. Again, every team has ups and downs, but that January stretch was real tough. If we take that stretch away, this team's fighting for a 2 or 3 seed at this moment. So it is what it is. Shit happens for a reason, but I guarantee you people are not trying to line up to play the Miami Heat if they can. If they can avoid it, they will try to.
100%, because look, they went to the finals and they breezed through the first round against a 1 seed. They sort of breezed through the second round. Jalen Brunson, I'm gonna give credit, but
absolutely,
he gave the Knicks a chance at some respect in that round.
Yeah,
they go up 3-0 against the Celtics and they kind of almost choke it away. Then they get to the finals and it's just Denver is Denver.
Denver is ridiculous.
Yeah, Miami had injuries, but Denver is Denver. Mm-hmm. But the Heat come back this year, but instead of Kyle Lowry, who, no disrespect, but he's just old and kind of done. Instead of Kyle Lowry and Gabe Vincent, who is a solid player, and Max Strus, who's much better this year, wasn't great last year. Now you have Terry Rozier instead of Kyle, who obviously, like, make or miss, he's shooting the ball. So it's something there.
Yeah.
You have, instead of Max Strus, who are once again great in Cleveland, but you got Duncan Robinson, who we're not getting into today, but incredible this year.
Been the best off-ball shooter in basketball this year.
And not even just the shooting, it's the playmaking, it's the finishing,
everything.
Like, incredible. He was rebounding, like, all kinds of stuff. He's blocking shots now.
I said earlier, it's funny because we're talking about the Heat's point guard room. I think Duncan Robinson's been their best pick and roll passer all year. I said that earlier, and maybe it's a hot take. It is what it is, but he's been just that level of playmaker. So yeah.
So you have him moving into the Max Strus minutes with all the stuff he's bringing now. The Gabe Vincent minutes you have, it may be Delon Wright at times in the playoffs, especially depending on the matchups. And also Josh Richardson finally caught his stride before he got injured. So once again, this Miami Heat team, I'm telling, like,
we're not even mentioning,
like, in Boston.
Yeah, we're not even mentioning Hawkes, who was rookie of the year contention basically the whole year. Once everybody got healthy, his role kind of went back.
And he's past the rookie wall now. So
yeah, he's been that. The team's definitely deeper. Caleb deserves some love. Jovic stepping into the 4 role now recently, man. Just the team's got it now. Yeah, the size has been on full fucking display recently, and it's just they match up better against. They have more versatility than they did last year. The Heat last year really struggled at several positions. They really didn't have a backup for Bam. Love was still on the team, but he wasn't being trusted. It's just a lot of things that are now falling into place after a long, treacherous season. But we all know Jimmy Butler's season starts post All-Star break, and if anybody's been watching,
it had. It started.
Watch out.
It started. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Playoff Foul. I'm Kenny. You find my social media, Kenny Spencer NBA. But forget about that because people have been following me on there anyway. Follow and subscribe to Playoff Foul. We've been kind of moving a little bit. That's great. Keep it going. Lou, where can the people find you at?
They can find me at Saucy Takes, just like the signs written up there. All together, no spaces with the Z at the end of Takes. But most importantly, guys, please subscribe to, like Kenny said, subscribe to Playoff Foul. Tell your favorite cousin, tell your favorite grandma, tell your uncle. It's just hoops talk. So
yeah,
appreciate you guys.
Scripted basketball talk. And at the end of the day, we'll see y'all next week.